It all started with a simple email marked urgent in all caps, a habit my boss, Mr. Thatcher, had perfected. He loved urgency almost as much as he loved micromanaging. I opened it reluctantly, hoping it wasn't another lecture about printer toner. Instead, the subject line read, "Life-changing opportunity." I clicked on it, bracing for disappointment, only to be summoned to his office immediately. Thatcher's office was his kingdom, complete with motivational posters featuring lions and eagles, and an oversized desk that screamed, "Compensating for something." As I stepped in, he greeted me with his usual dramatic flair. "Ah, my star performer. Sit down." His grin was the kind that made you check your wallet out of instinct. "What's this about?" I asked, suspicious. Thatcher rarely called anyone his star performer unless he needed something. "I'll get straight to the point," he said, leaning forward like he was about to reveal a state secret. "The board is on my ass. They think I'm too detached. Not relatable enough." "You? Detached?" Shocking, I deadpanned, which earned me a sharp glare. "I need them to see me as a man of the people. Someone who understands commitment, relationships, stability." He paused for dramatic effect. "And that's where you come in." My brain short-circuited. "Are you firing me?" "God, no," he exclaimed, looking genuinely offended. "I need you to fake date me. Just for a little while. You know, show the board I'm a stable family man type." I blinked at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. "You want me to pretend to date you?" "Precisely." He beamed as if he'd just solved world hunger. "It's foolproof. The board will eat it up, you'll get a promotion, and I'll keep my job. Win-win." "This is insane," I said, already plotting my escape route. "There's no way anyone would believe we're dating." "Why not?" he asked, offended. "I'm attractive. I'm charming. I have a great sense of humor. Do you?" I shot back. "Look," he said, leaning in, "just think about the perks. A corner office. A raise. And all you have to do is hold my hand at a couple of events and post a few Instagram stories." "Hold your hand? Do you think I'm running a charity?" Thatcher sighed, his face falling into a rare moment of sincerity. "If I don't do this, they'll force me out. I'll be replaced by that snake, Peterson. You don't want Peterson running this place, do you?" I didn't. Peterson was the kind of guy who'd sell your grandmother for a bonus. "Fine," I said, against my better judgment. "But if we're doing this, there are rules. No kissing. No weird PDA. And absolutely no sharing toothbrushes." "Agreed," he said quickly, extending his hand. "Partners?" I shook his hand reluctantly. "This better be worth it." "Oh, it will be," he said with a grin. "Now, let's talk backstory. Every great relationship has a backstory. And that's how I found myself spending the next hour crafting the most absurd how we met story I'd ever heard. According to Thatcher, we bonded over a shared love of spreadsheets at an HR seminar. I gagged at the thought but played along. By the time I left his office, I felt like I'd signed a deal with the devil. But hey, a promotion was a promotion, right? The absurdity hit me fully when I got home and my roommate, Clara, asked how my day was. "You won't believe this," I said, collapsing onto the couch. "My boss wants me to fake date him." Clara burst out laughing. "Thatcher? The guy who says synergy like it's a magic spell?" "Yup. That's the one." "Oh, this is going to be hilarious," she said, already grabbing popcorn. "Please tell me you're going to mess with him." I grinned, an idea forming. "Oh, you have no idea." It was going to be a disaster, but if I was going down, I was taking Thatcher with me. The next morning, the office buzzed with a weird energy that I couldn't quite place. People stopped talking when I walked by, and there were far too many knowing smirks exchanged in my direction. I hadn't even had my coffee yet, but something was definitely off. By the time I reached my desk, Linda from HR had already cornered me with a Cheshire Cat grin. So, she said, dragging out the word like she was savoring it, you and Mr. Thatcher, huh? I froze. What about me and Mr. Thatcher? Oh, come on. Don't be coy. The entire office knows. Knows what? Linda leaned in like she was delivering state secrets. That you two are an item. My stomach dropped. Excuse me? Don't worry, she said, patting my arm. Your secret's safe with me. But honestly, it's about time Thatcher settled down. I mean, who would have thought he'd go for someone like you? Someone like me? I repeated, equal parts offended and baffled. Linda just winked and sashayed away, leaving me standing there like a deer in headlights. By lunch, the news had spread faster than a fire in a paper factory. Everywhere I turned, there were whispers, giggles, and badly concealed stares. Carol from accounting even gave me a thumbs up as I passed her desk. The situation hit a new low during the team meeting when Thatcher waltzed in with the smuggest grin I'd ever seen. He winked at me, actually winked, and then proceeded to drop the most ridiculous line of the day. Let's keep this meeting short, folks, he said, addressing the team. Some of us have plans later. The room erupted into a chorus of knowing oohs, while I sank lower in my chair, wishing for spontaneous combustion. After the meeting, I cornered him in his office. What the hell was that? I hissed, slamming the door shut behind me. What was what? He asked innocently, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place, which, unfortunately, he did. The winking. The plan's comment. People are talking, Thatcher. Well, isn't that the point, he said, clearly amused. The board needs to believe this, remember? I didn't agree to becoming the office soap opera, I shot back. Relax, he said, waving a hand dismissively. It's just a bit of harmless fun. Harmless fun? I repeated, incredulous. Linda from HR just implied you're dating beneath your league. Did she? He frowned. I'll have a word with her. Don't bother, I said, pinching the bridge of my nose. Let's just get through this without me losing what little dignity I have left. Things escalated later that day when Thatcher decided we needed a public display of affection to sell the charade. His idea? Sharing a plate of spaghetti in the break room. You've got to be kidding me, I said, staring at the plate he'd just slapped down on the table. It's romantic, he argued, twirling a fork full of noodles. Lady and the Tramp did it. We're in an office, I hissed. Not an animated Disney movie. But he was already leaning across the table, dangling a strand of spaghetti in front of my face. Come on, he said, wiggling his eyebrows. For the promotion. I sighed, grabbed the other end of the noodle, and begrudgingly leaned in. Before we could reenact the worst moment of my life, Jerry from IT walked in. Oh, sorry, Jerry said, looking both horrified and fascinated. Am I interrupting something? Yes, I said quickly, while Thatcher simultaneously said, no. Jerry blinked at us, then backed out of the room slowly. Carry on, he said, closing the door behind him. The entire ordeal was mortifying, but the cherry on top came when I returned to my desk to find an anonymous note that read, *, can't wait for the wedding invite. *. That night, I vented to Clara over a bottle of wine. Let me get this straight, she said, barely holding back laughter. He made you do a spaghetti scene? In the break room? Yes, I groaned, burying my face in my hands. This is comedy gold, she said, wiping away a tear. You're living in a sitcom. I'm living in hell, I corrected. Well, if it's any consolation, people probably think you're a saint for putting up with him, Clara said. I snorted. Yeah, I'm sure sainthood is right around the corner. As ridiculous as it was, part of me couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. If nothing else, I'd have one hell of a story to tell, assuming I survived the madness. The next day, Thatcher decided to up the ante, declaring that we needed a real date to solidify our backstory. His brilliant idea? Dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town, a place so exclusive it required a dress code and a minimum wage of $1 million just to breathe the air. "You're joking," I said when he handed me the invitation. "It's perfect," he insisted, adjusting his cufflinks like a wannabe James Bond. "The board members frequent this place. If they see us there, it'll add authenticity." "Authenticity?" I snorted. "You've got authentic written all over you with that spray tan." Ignoring me, he gave a smug smile. 7 o'clock. "Don't be late." That evening, I showed up in a dress that Clara had lent me. She'd insisted on something slinky and black, saying it would knock him dead, though I was more interested in knocking him unconscious. When I arrived, Thatcher was waiting by the entrance, decked out in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my rent. He gave me an exaggerated once-over and whistled. "You clean up nice." "Don't get used to it," I replied, breezing past him. Inside, the restaurant was a shrine to pretension. Chandeliers sparkled, waiters moved like ballet dancers, and the menu didn't bother listing prices because if you had to ask, you didn't belong there. Thatcher wasted no time launching into his boyfriend act, pulling out my chair and loudly ordering champagne. "Only the best for my girl," he said, beaming at the waiter. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. "You know this is just for show, right? No need to audition for a rom-com." But he was already in full character, leaning across the table with a dazzling smile. "Darling, you wound me. Can a man spoil the love of his life?" I was about to retort when I noticed a group of older men in suits at a nearby table. They were watching us closely, their conversation slowing as they exchanged glances. "Are those," I began, nodding subtly in their direction. "The board members," Thatcher confirmed under his breath. "Smile and laugh. Make it convincing." Reluctantly, I played along, letting out a laugh that sounded more like a dying seal. Thatcher covered it with an exaggerated chuckle of his own, grabbing my hand across the table. "You're terrible," I said through gritted teeth, my face plastered with a fake grin. "And you're perfect," he replied, squeezing my hand for effect. The board members seemed satisfied, turning back to their conversation, but the real challenge came when the food arrived. Thatcher, in all his infinite wisdom, had ordered oysters, because nothing says romance like slippery raw shellfish. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, staring at the plate. "It's classy," he whispered back, picking one up. "Now, follow my lead." He tilted his head back and slurped the oyster with all the grace of a vacuum cleaner, then gestured for me to do the same. Reluctantly, I picked one up, but as soon as I tilted it, the thing slipped out of my hand and landed squarely in my lap. Thatcher choked on his champagne, trying not to laugh, while I scrambled to clean up the mess. "This is your fault," I hissed, dabbing at the stain with a napkin. "You're doing great, sweetheart," he said, still chuckling. The night dragged on with more awkward moments, including a waiter who congratulated us on our engagement and a pianist who dedicated a love song to our table. By the time we left, I was ready to murder Thatcher and dump his body in the nearest dumpster. "See? That wasn't so bad," he said as we walked to the car. "You owe me," I shot back, climbing into the passenger seat. "Relax." The board loved it. I even heard Peterson grumbling about how happy we looked. As much as I hated to admit it, he was right. The charade was working. But that didn't make it any less humiliating. When I got home, Clara was waiting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Well," she asked, looking up expectantly. "It was a disaster," I said, kicking off my heels. "Define disaster." "Oysters, fake proposals, and a pianist who thought we were in the Notebook." Clara burst out laughing. "This is better than reality TV. You should start charging admission." "I should start charging him for emotional damages," I muttered, collapsing onto the couch. Despite the absurdity of it all, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that things were only going to get worse. After all, with Thatcher involved, there was no such thing as rock bottom. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find an email waiting for me with the subject line, *emergency team meeting, attendance mandatory. *. Thatcher had CC'd everyone in the company, which was never a good sign. As I made my way to the conference room, I could feel the stares following me. The whispering had reached an all-time high, and someone even dared to say, "There she is," as I walked past. By the time I entered, Thatcher was already at the head of the table, looking infuriatingly composed. He gestured for me to sit next to him, and the moment I did, he placed his hand over mine in full view of everyone. "Thank you all for coming," he began, flashing a smile that could sell snake oil. "I've called this meeting to share some exciting news." I stiffened. Exciting news? What the hell was he about to do? Thatcher turned to me with a look so genuine it could have fooled a lie detector. "As some of you may have guessed, Rebecca and I have been seeing each other for a while now." The room erupted into gasps and murmurs. My jaw hit the floor, but before I could protest, he squeezed my hand, a warning to stay quiet. "We've kept it private," he continued, "because we didn't want it to interfere with our professional lives. But given recent developments, we felt it was time to come clean." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Come clean? Developments? Was this man writing our script on the fly? "Rebecca has been an incredible support to me, both personally and professionally," he added, glancing at me like I was his soulmate. "And I'm thrilled to announce that she'll be joining me as my +1 at the annual board gala this Friday." My stomach dropped. The board gala was the event of the year, a black tie affair filled with schmoozing, speeches, and enough alcohol to drown a small village. The murmurs grew louder, and I caught snippets of conversation. "Did you know?" "I always suspected." "Lucky bastard." Thatcher wrapped up the meeting with a smug smile, and as soon as the room emptied, I rounded on him. "Are you out of your mind?" I hissed. He leaned back in his chair, utterly unfazed. "Relax. It's just one night. Think of it as the final act in our performance." "One night?" I repeated, furious. "You just announced our fake relationship to the entire company. There's no going back now." "That's the point," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "The more people who believe it, the better our chances with the board." I wanted to scream, but instead, I grabbed my bag and stormed out, ignoring his calls after me. By Friday, I'd resigned myself to the inevitable. Clara had forced me into a sequin dress that left little to the imagination, claiming it was strategically distracting. When Thatcher picked me up in a sleek black car, he looked annoyingly perfect in his tuxedo. He handed me a glass of champagne as I got in, his smirk firmly in place. "You look stunning," he said. "And you look insufferable," I shot back, downing the champagne in one go. At the gala, Thatcher was the picture of charm, introducing me to board members and colleagues like I was his fiancée. I played along, smiling through gritted teeth and laughing at jokes that weren't funny. The real chaos began when Peterson, the most skeptical board member, approached us with his wife in tow. "Thatcher," Peterson said, his tone dripping with suspicion. "And this must be Rebecca, is it?" Thatcher pulled me closer, his hand resting on the small of my back. "That's right. Rebecca's been my rock through everything." Peterson raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? How did you two meet?" Before I could panic, Thatcher launched into the most ridiculous story I'd ever heard. "We bumped into each other at a charity event," he said, grinning. "She spilled wine all over me, and I knew right then she was the one." I blinked. "Right. Love at first, spill." Peterson didn't look convinced, but his wife was beaming. "That's so romantic," she gushed. "You must tell me more." Thatcher kept up the charade with ease, spinning a tale so absurd it bordered on fiction. Meanwhile, I nodded and smiled, praying the night would end soon. As the evening wore on, Thatcher became bolder, wrapping his arm around my shoulders and whispering in my ear. "You're doing great. Just a little longer." I resisted the urge to elbow him in the ribs. "I swear, if you don't get me out of here soon." "Relax," he murmured. "The board loves us. You're a natural." By the time we finally left, I was ready to collapse. In the car, I turned to him, exhausted. "There. You got your perfect performance. Happy now? He looked at me, uncharacteristically serious. I couldn't have done it without you. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Well, I said finally, don't get used to it. This was a one-time deal. He smiled, but there was something different about it, something almost genuine. Understood. As we drove away, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to Thatcher than I'd given him credit for. Not that I'd ever admit it, of course.